Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Jag Panzer, the Hallowed, out June 23rd on Atomic Fire Records. This album has 10 tracks, 53 minutes in length, and this is the band's 11th full-length studio record. They are an American heavy metal band. As far as the design of this album, this is a concept record, and even if you didn't know that it was a concept coming in, within the first two songs, you know it is. It has these key elements that really define the journey, the path, the story behind the experience of listening to this album. From the narrator to the sound nuances, everything is in the right place at the right time to connect these songs with one another, but also keeping the listener connected with the story and the overall fluidity of this album. I felt like listening to this record, the songs can work outside of the concept because they have a way of being hooky and catchy enough that you can gravitate to them, and the nuances that exist around them are there in order to embellish the individual chapters that are carried on each and every single song. Obviously, you can get more out of this album if you go from beginning to end. That is the whole point of the record. But I honestly feel if you take some out of the context of the album, you can still feel the presence, the power, and the work that went behind creating songs that have individual strength, not just depending on the collective alone. When it comes to the sound experience, I wasn't a fan from the get-go. I'm going to be honest, the first couple of times I listened to this album, I didn't really connect with it. I liked the story, I liked the concept, I liked the fluidity that the album had, but the old school production and the old school heavy metal, power metal sound just didn't seem to fit what I wanted out of this record. I was expecting it to be a little bit more modern, to have a little bit more of a modern touch, and maybe elevate that with a little bit more clarity around the shapes of the songs, around the elements of these songs. It wasn't the case, and because of it, it took me slightly longer to appreciate this record. But when I discovered what the two main pillars of this album were all about, I could not deny how good those two pillars were, and they are the guitar sound and the vocal performance. These are definitely the two main protagonists behind the overall experience of this record. Guitar-wise, this album feels like it has a lot of life. It has a lot of energy. You look at the solos, for example. The solos not only add value to the songs and quality to the songs, they always seem to make the tracks feel bigger. Even tracks that are already big by nature, the solos even make them feel slightly bigger. So they always have this opportunity and this idea of infusing brightness, size, volume, grandeur, if you will, into the songs, and creating mini climaxes within the tracks. And that is something that stays with the listener because the guitar playing overall is really phenomenal. I really enjoy the guitar sound, the guitar experience, the execution. Some songs a little bit more thick, some songs a little bit more methodic, some having more of a classic heavy metal influence, some having more of a power metal influence, and some even bringing some prog elements into the forefront. There's a lot to digest guitar-wise, even though this is not a very textured guitar album. It's just a very guitar-centric. So it allows you to see everything that it has, allows you to see the fluidity that it offers, the movement that it gives to the record, and definitely the energy that it brings into the forefront. This is not to say that the drums don't play a role on this record or that the bass doesn't play a role, but I think everything falls a little bit behind the guitar sound. The guitar sound is definitely in the forefront. It wants your attention, it demands your attention, it pushes everything into the back burner. Now the drums help push the guitars forward, or help at least give them a platform in the way they come across. Not a very heavy album drum-wise, not a very powerful album drum-wise, but just enough in the background to give the guitars that stage, that platform to shine. Vocally, the other pillar of this album, I honestly really enjoyed the vocal performance and how dynamic it is. First of all, I enjoy the fact that they added a narrator to the story. It becomes a little bit more important as you get deeper into it, because it almost allows you to reflect on where you are, where you were, and where you're heading. So even if you're losing a little bit of track of where the story is taking you, the narrator has this ability of always bringing you back into that path, bringing you back into the fold, allowing you to feel a little bit more comfortable. So I enjoyed the narrator from that point of view, and it wasn't really overused. It really felt like it belonged in the songs, that it belonged in the tracks. So I enjoyed the addition of that element in order to connect better, not just the songs, but the story itself. The other elements of the vocals that I enjoyed, for example, the layers. Some vocals are a little bit more textured, and that adds presence, that adds substance without changing too much of the dynamics and without having to change too much of the vocal range on specific songs that need to have more of a balanced delivery, but at the same time you don't want that balanced delivery to become repetitive. So adding that layer, adding those textures, moving from the verses into the chorus, definitely creates some ebbs and flows without changing the overall DNA of the vocal performance within those specific tracks. Outside of that, the vocal range on this album is phenomenal. I mean, from this lower, not deeper, but from the lower, more connected, more balanced approach to the over the top. I mean, this album has so much movement, so much life. And I don't think you can put together a concept album like this that tries to tell a story from different points of view without having that approach, without having that dynamic vocal approach. You need to give life to the story, and you're not going to be able to give life to the story if your vocal performance stays compact from first all the way to last. So I honestly really enjoy the range. I really enjoy the vocal tone, delivery, the choices in songs, and how some of them feel a little bit darker vocally, some feel a little bit brighter, always infusing the right mood, the right atmosphere with the right portion of the vocal range. All around, this is an album that grew on me. I was expecting something a little bit more polished, came a little bit less polished, more old school, but I honestly, the pillars of this record, the vocals, the guitars, and the concept itself is what ends up selling me on this album. But I definitely felt like I was listening to something from my youth, and that eventually grew on me. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Bound as One. This is the opening track on the album, and it has a great guitar-drum combo. Now, the guitars are a little bit more in the forefront, the drums are a little bit more behind, but still, the two of them working really well together in order to create substance, volume, and presence. Vocally, the song immediately sets the tone for what the track is going to be all about, but also sets the tone for the vocal range that you're going to get throughout this entire album. It's one of those tracks that puts you on notice. And if you're going to open a record, I honestly felt that maybe the second song would have been a better opening song from the theme around it and how they built it. But when you look at experience and when you look at connecting the listener from the get-go, this song had the right ingredients. It had the right movement, very dynamic, very to the point, mixing heavy metal with power metal, creating a lot of fluidity, always taking the listener forward. Great sound presence, thick, with substance within its volume. I wouldn't say heavy, I would say more powerful, the better word to describe the overall experience. Super hooky chorus, great layers in the vocals, an outstanding solo section, a very complete song that paints the perfect picture for what the album is going to be all about. Next we have Ties That Bind, a more guitar-centric song when you compare it to Bound as One. Even though Bound as One pushes the guitars forward, you still have the drums playing a huge role. This one, it really feels like the guitars are separating themselves from everything else. It's a little bit of a slower song. It has more of a classic heavy metal ballad style approach to it, using some guitar spices here and there in order to break the monotony, in order to break the overall linearity that the track has. Very balanced vocally in the verses, and then pushing the ceiling of the vocal range in the chorus. The layers that the vocals have really helped create volume. It integrates really well with the overall melody of the track, and musically it's a very balanced song all around, but vocally super strong. A nice ballad, a nice slower song that allows you to, gather your breath and catch your right steps in order for you to then engage with more climatic moments that the record has to offer down the line. Next, and last but not least, Weather the Storm. I felt like this song had a little bit of a darker tone vocally, not from start to finish, but there are some moments that this song feels a little bit darker, a little bit more somber in the vocal delivery. It shows you something that you haven't really seen up until that point, bringing the vocals a little bit lower, allowing you to feel like there is darkness, that there is a storm brewing around you. There is something menacing happening. And that it gets delivered really well, perhaps better with the vocals than with the sound itself. But it's a very dynamic song vocally all around. It doesn't stay in that pocket. It doesn't stay in that zone. it really moves, it grows and morphs. It almost showcases the entire vocal range and everything that they have at their display in one single track. Everything that you're going to hear throughout this entire album, you're going to hear it in one single song, and that song is Weather the Storm. Musically, it pushes almost a little bit more of a prog vibe at times. Not full prog. I would say early Queensryche. It has a little bit of early Queensryche sound with King Diamond vocals. That's the best way that I can describe this song. Is a little bit of a hybrid. But the difference in vocal performance and how dynamic that vocal performance is definitely sets this song apart. And then when you look at the sound behind it, there are guitar elements on this track that you don't really find anywhere else on this record. It's a song that is subtle at times, but doesn't necessarily hide those subtle natures and those subtle elements within the overall guitar performance. Really interesting track because of how these two parts work as one. The guitar sound with its individual attributes, and then the outstanding vocal range that puts everything on the table. This is it, Jag Panzer with the Hallowed, out June 23rd on Atomic Fire Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.